Okay, so today was the Gospel of St. Mark on the synagogue official's 12-year-old daughter who died, and also the woman who was afflicted with hemorrhage for 12 years. So I wanted to comment on it because of what I never hear anyone saying when they talk about it, which of course obviously there's an infinite amount of information in all of these Gospels, so you can't cover everything. But first, about the synagogue official's daughter, I think obviously it's important that when Jesus went, he took St. Peter, St. James, and St. John. I mean, Peter, James, and John, those are obviously the three favorites. The three had, kind of set aside. He took them up on Mount Tabor for the Transfiguration, and in the Garden of Gethsemane, he again separated and took those three apart a little bit, so obviously they had, some special status. And for St. Peter, that's pretty obvious. He was the first pope, he was definitely set aside for a very special purpose to be the pope. And I don't need to go into it, just study St. Peter, because he kind of, you could see all the popes, all the things about the popes in him. Yeah. He's the one who cut off Malchus' ear in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wielded the sword. So, he also he prefigures all the popes and the papal power, temporal power, which is not there anymore, but was there for a while. The various things about St. Peter. He's the one that Jesus said, go get the coin from the fish and pay the temple tax. So, yeah, Peter was going to be involved in temporal affairs as the pope. And then, of course, obviously, St. John, that's pretty obvious. He had, I think, the most special designation of all. He was the caretaker of Mary. Our Lord put the most precious treasure that he had in St. John's care, his mother. And there's nothing, there isn't a higher office that you could have than that. So what about St. James? So we know St. James was the first martyr in the church, but there's something else about St. James that I don't think is really realized enough, especially among people of Spanish heritage. And that is, well, everybody kind of knows, the way of St. James in Spain, and, they do the walk and stuff like that, kind of, sort of. But really, that's only the tip of the iceberg. St. James, the Hispanic people should be much more devoted to St. James. St. James, converted Spain, and one of the things that is not that well understood is that he was especially devoted to Mary. Him and St. John were brothers. They were actually cousins of Mary, but that wasn't in the biological relationship, but those two were the most beloved to Mary. St. John, obviously, like an angel, her caretaker, but St. James too. St. James had the second most special relationship with Mary, and that you can see that when Mary was sent to Spain by God, carried by the angels, where the angels formed that little statue of Our Lady of the Pillar, the first shrine to Mary in the world erected in Spain by St. James. And and so that the devotion to Mary, and even Our Lady of Guadalupe, that started in Spain. That was Our Lady of Guadalupe is in Spain, and when she identified herself by that title in Mexico City, when she appeared to Juan Diego there, she was identifying herself under a title that was already known and revered and loved in Spain already. At any rate, so St. James had a very special status for two reasons: being the first martyr, but on equal footing with that, his devotion to Mary. Okay, so I wanted to point that out about the healing of the official's daughter. But the other case, the woman with the hemorrhage, I think it's interesting to point out that St. Mark points out that, the whole crowd was pressing on Jesus, and even the disciples and apostles said, how can you ask who touched me when everyone's touching you? So I think that's kind of important, because if you reflect on that, well, what was the difference? And Jesus himself explained it when he told the woman, your faith has saved you. So, well, yeah, I mean, come on, Jesus didn't have any questions in his mind. He knew exactly what was going on. He was the author of the whole episode. He's the one who gave the woman the faith to begin with. Yeah, so I heard a priest saying, well, Jesus was looking around us. Jesus knew exactly who did it. The reason why Jesus did a lot of these things is so that it wouldn't be so obvious that he authored it and knew it. God works in mysterious ways. So he would do things like saying, who touched me? Yeah, he knew exactly what he wanted done. He wanted the woman to come forward and give the testimony as to what happened. Not for him. He knew everything about it. But for the people there, it was for them to hear what she had to say, and so that he could say, your faith has saved you. Why? Because all these people touching him without faith. So nothing's happening to them. That's an important thing. And it causes me to reflect on, for Catholics, receiving him in Holy Communion. There's different ways to do it. And I think, I don't know how much the children are taught. Because some people, it's like they're loading boxes. They're checking off a box. I went to Mass in Communion. They just did something. It's kind of impersonal. They did it. Okay, if they had a good intention to receive him, even though they didn't know how to properly do it, or really had little understanding of it, yeah, it has some value, but it's limited. And I spoke about that in another video, how our preparation has a lot to do with what we get out of the sacrament. It's not that Jesus has some limit. He has infinite potential. It's what are we going to get? It's just like, so in these people were all touching him. They weren't getting anything out of it because they didn't have any faith. Same thing with receiving him in communion. And one of the things that came to my mind, that recently I had heard this song written by Hal David, and the music was by Burt Bacharach, Dionne Warwick, made famous by Dionne Warwick in the 1960s, Anyone Who Had a Heart. And that's why, it's like our Lord could say that, anyone who had a heart could look at me and see that I love you. And I was like, that's why we have the crucifix. If you look at him on the cross, you can see that he loves you. And then in that song it goes on to say, anyone who had a heart would surely take me, and she says, in his arms, and love me too. But Jesus could say, anyone who had a heart would surely take me into his heart and love me too. So that's what he wants us to do. It's an act of love to receive him. And it's not just checking a box or loading boxes, or getting something done. That's what he really wants. He really wants an intimate relationship of love with us. And so I wanted to mention that.